Well, I want to start off with a true story today. A number of years ago, Sports Illustrated magazine, there was a story about a guy named Darwin Parks. He was 6 feet tall, 23-year-old college student who played in the city basketball league in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was on a team called Pete Marwick and Company. That was the team sponsors. One night they were playing a team called Young and Company, and Marwick and Company only had 5 players show up. Nevertheless, the 5 players played the whole game, never came out, and toward the end of the game, the score was still close. Well, with 2 minutes left, Marwick and Company player coach Bob Burgess fouls out. So now the team is playing with just 4 players against their 5. With 5 seconds left, Darwin Parks hits a 12-foot jump shot to tie the score and send the game into overtime. 40 seconds into overtime, Tim Smith of Marwick and Company also fouls out. So now it's 3 on 5. Then 30 seconds later, Jeff Hill fouls out with the score tied. This leaves only Darwin Parks and Steve Shorkey, who somehow managed to forge a 63-59 lead, playing 2 players against the other team's 5. With 1 minute and 12 seconds to go in overtime, Shorkey fouls out, so now it is 1 on 5. Darwin Parks versus the other team. A Young and Company player misses a shot. Darwin Parks somehow manages to pull down the rebound, dribbles the length of the court, is fouled, and makes both free throws. And he, or his team, now leads by 6. And by this time, the bench, the other 4 guys who have fouled out, are just going crazy over there. You know, Michael Jordan has never done this, right? However, Young and Company are able to solve Darwin Parks' intense one-man zone defense and easily scored. Well, now Darwin Parks has a problem. How is he supposed to inbound the ball to himself? Well, he answers that question by bouncing it off an opponent's knees, and after grabbing the loose ball, he again is fouled. He makes 2 free throws. The other team comes down and scores as time runs out. Darwin Parks plays the last 1 minute and 12 seconds by himself, 1 against 5, and yet managed to hang on for a 68-65 victory. Now, Darwin Parks had found himself in an unexpected, very difficult situation. Kind of a fun situation. Sometimes, us regular people, we find ourselves in unexpected or difficult situations that are not so fun. Sometimes we barely even survive them. You know, sometimes when things aren't going well at home, maybe you find yourself swimming in an ocean of debt and just, about to drown. Maybe you've experienced a broken relationship. Or maybe circumstances in your life have just gotten so discouraged that you're just about to throw in the towel. You know, we all go through difficult life situations from time to time, things we didn't expect, things we didn't ask for. And if you're not going through a tough situation right now, your turn will come. And so will mine. Well, I'm glad you're here today or joining us at home on Facebook Live. We're in the 3rd week of a 4-part series we're simply calling The Heart. Week number 1 was about our hearts being Christ's home. Remember, going into every different room. Last week was that great verse, says that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. In week 3, it is God can strengthen and heal a troubled or broken heart. You know, if we had time today, and if everyone here was willing, if we passed a microphone around and just had each person one by one stand and tell their own experiences with adversity at different times in their lives. Every person, just from side to side, every person stood and talked about different adversities they've gone through. I think we would all be literally overwhelmed by the amount of and the severity of setbacks and tragedies and losses that have been experienced by those of us right here in this room, people sitting all around you, or things that we're up against right now. Now, sometimes we try to fool each other, and think everybody besides me has it all together. No problems. But that's just an illusion. The truth is, if you're alive, you have hurt, or you are hurting, or you will hurt at some time. It's like the college football coach who was shaving one morning when his wife yelled upstairs to tell him that Sports Illustrated was on the phone. When his excitement, he nicked himself with a razor. He was just so excited, to finally get some attention for this program that he had been building in obscurity for so long. Well, he rushed down the stairs. He fell, cutting himself on the forehead, bruising his knee. When he finally staggered to the phone and said, "Hello," the voice on the other end said, "Sir, I'm happy to tell you that for only 75 cents an issue, you can receive a one-year subscription to Sports Illustrated." Kind of a letdown. True story. But that's not the kind of adversity that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the real kind. The kind that comes into the lives of real people like you and me. I know that some of you have lost a loved one in the last couple of years, and it's very real. Some of you are facing very difficult work-related situations, as James mentioned earlier. People laid off or not paid the same amount. Others are dealing maybe with rebellious teenagers. Maybe some here are stuck in an unhappy marriage that there seems no way really that's ever going to get any better. Maybe some here have been hurt deeply by someone that you once trusted. Some are reeling from financial hits, personally or to your business, to your IRAs, life savings. Others are maybe facing physical challenges, even life-threatening illnesses in some cases. Some are feeling like failures as parents, as in our careers. Some of us have experienced long-standing relationships that were somehow damaged and broken and don't seem to be repairable. Some of us live with a constant undercurrent of fear and anxiety in our lives, or just the feeling of being constantly overwhelmed by too many demands on our lives, and we just get worn down by it all. The list could go on and on. You know, a spouse is unfaithful, a tragedy strikes your family, a miscarried pregnancy, feelings of rejection or loneliness. Like I said, if we knew and could hear from each person here what you've gone through, I think it would be overwhelming to all of us. The amount of and the severity of heartbreak and troubles that just those of us in this room have faced in our lifetimes. To which the Bible says, God can heal and strengthen a troubled or broken heart. Now, a lot of people these days either don't know that or maybe don't believe that. Even some of us who are Christians sometimes have a hard time believing it. And so we try other things. Anything to try to get through the difficult times and disappointments and adversities that we go through. For instance, one thing people do is they just ignore it. You know, when they really get hurt in a relationship, maybe with their parents or other family members, someone at work, they just ignore those empty, gnawing feelings inside. They just, well, if I ignore it, maybe it'll just go away. When there are mounting signs that maybe one of our kids are on drugs or sleeping with their girlfriend or boyfriend, we just try to pretend that that's not happening. Or when your financial situation is going from bad to worse, you know, you keep putting off doing anything about it. The fact is, we almost all have a tendency to postpone that which is painful. But denying a hurt, you know, denying a serious problem usually doesn't make it go away. A second way that we attempt to respond to hurts that we experience is by just running. In Psalm 55, David writes, "Oh, for wings like a dove to just fly off to the far-off deserts, to flee from the storm." It's human nature to try to run, to escape. And people do it through drugs, through drinking, eating, entertainment, recreation, shopping. Some even try to use religion as a means of escaping the torment of personal problems or disappointments. Another way that some people handle their hurts and emotional wounds is by trying to hide it from other people. You know, there's people, some I'm sure among them, who might be willing to admit to ourselves that we're hurting, that we're worried, that we are disappointed, that we're grieving about something, but we don't want to let other people know about it. And that mentality has given rise to a couple of very popular games that people play these days. One is the mask-wearing game, and we're not talking about coronavirus masks. You know, we may be experiencing a horrible disappointment or something, or really something, just got some discouraging news, or we're just fighting off depression or whatever. And yet, even when a good friend asks, "Hey, how's it going?" we quickly put on the "everything's fine" mask. You know, everything's fine, and we just keep going. The second game, one which most married couples have perfected, it's called the "Is Something Wrong" game. You all know this. Hey, is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Are you sure? You don't seem quite right. Nothing is wrong. I can tell by the way you're talking, something is, nothing, you've all been there, right? We try to hide our hurts and our disappointments at all costs. Another thing some people do is they attempt to fix themselves. In fact, most of us do this first. We don't need the help or sympathy of other people. Counseling is for weak people, blah, blah, blah. We'll handle our hurts ourselves. Then there's what psychologists call catastrophizing. This is when people let their minds and emotions be traumatized through the imagining of worst-case scenarios. And all of that negative energy, it just takes a toll over time. It can undermine your work, your relationships. It can undermine your happiness. It can undermine your quality of life. And the final way that people often respond to adversity and hurts and disappointments is simply by giving up. And maybe this is a stage where you're at right now. Maybe you've been carrying a hurt or a disappointment or a fear or a trauma for so long that you're just about ready to cave in and quit. Or maybe not quit, but just collapse. We find David in that condition in Psalm 130. He's really down. Low down. Down, doobie-doo, down, down. He's really down. But seriously, in Psalm 130, he says, "O Lord, from the depths of despair, I cry for your help." I mean, he is teetering on the brink. Well, I don't know about you, but I have tried just about all of these things. I've tried to ignore the hurt or disappointment and pretend that they're not really there or they're not that bad. I've done that. I have attempted to run and escape from things, through work or recreation or entertainment. I've tried to hide my hurts and wear the everything's fine mask or the of course nothing's wrong with me, I'm the pastor mask. I've attempted to fix myself. My mind has run wild with worst case scenarios. But the only thing I haven't done yet is just give up and quit. On myself, or on God, or on the church, or everything. I have been tempted more times than I can count, but I haven't quit. I haven't collapsed yet. Well, in an attempt to sort of answer or explain that God can heal a troubled or broken heart, I want to sort of walk through a story quickly from John chapter 11 about a man named Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. You're probably basically familiar with this story, but it goes like this. Mary and Martha had a very serious problem on their hands. Their brother Lazarus was sick, really sick to the point of death. And one thing I like about them is that when they had a problem, they went straight to the Lord for help. Not like we do sometimes. We often exhaust every other possibility or option. And then in desperation, as a final last-ditch effort, we turn to the Lord, When all else fails, try God. Well, they were smarter than that. And they came trusting in the will of God. Look at verse 3. They sent this simple message to Jesus: "Lord, the one you love is sick." They're not demanding that Jesus come at once. They're not even making an outright request that he heal Lazarus, although I think that's sort of implied. They're simply and humbly saying, "Lord, here's the situation." When verses 5 and 6, it says that Jesus loved Mary, Martha and her sister Mary, and Lazarus. Yet when he heard Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days where he was. Now, if Jesus loved them so much, how come he didn't come quickly and heal him? He waited around for 2 days. And during that time, Lazarus died. There's a passage, I think it's in Isaiah 55, that says that God's thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And his timing is not always our timing. Our first thought is, if he loved Lazarus and this family, why didn't he come? Why didn't he come in time? But in reality, he did come in his time. And everything went exactly as he had planned. Well, as the time Jesus finally did arrive, by the time he arrived, Lazarus was already dead and in his tomb. Now, in those days, they buried people on the same day, usually, as they died, Today we wait 3 or 4 days or even a week or longer, depending on circumstances. And Martha came running out to meet Jesus and said in verse 21, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Later in verse 2, when Mary comes out to see Jesus, she says the exact same words. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I mean, you can imagine the kind of anxiety and fear they were going through the past couple of days. That's all they could talk about. That's all they could think about. If only Jesus had been here, this tragedy could have been prevented. And in what they said, you see both faith and doubt. Faith in that they believed Jesus had the power to heal Lazarus, if only he had arrived earlier. But doubt, now it's too late to do anything. Didn't even occur to them that Jesus might raise Lazarus from the dead. But isn't that how our faith is a lot of times? We believe that God has everything under control, and yet we worry. We believe that God is always watching over us, and yet sometimes we feel distant from Him. We all do it, fluctuate between faith and doubt. Trusting in the timing of God, the timing of God is one of the most difficult aspects of the Christian faith, and only the most mature can trust in the timing of God and remain at peace inside at the same time. Nevertheless, trusting God to work things out in His way and in His time is a characteristic that we should all seek to develop. So here's the scene. Lazarus is in the tomb, which is a cave with a large rock covering the entrance. Standing in front of the tomb are Mary and Martha, the two sisters of Lazarus, other family members, friends, and neighbors who had come to comfort them, and Jesus. And in verse 39, Jesus told them, take away the stone. But Martha says something like, Lord, his body has already begun to decay. What's the point of opening the tomb now? There will be a foul odor. This is not a good idea. Obviously, she hasn't got it figured out yet. She's confused as to what Jesus is doing and why. Well, then the moment of truth arrived. The stone had been rolled away. A prayer had been spoken. The crowd is looking on, uncertain as to what Jesus is up to. And suddenly he shouted in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Now you can imagine that shout got the full attention of the crowd. And every eye was riveted on the opening of that tomb. Because if Lazarus doesn't come out, Jesus, this is going to not look good at all. He has spent 3 years building up credibility and followers and so forth. If Lazarus, he put himself in a tough situation here. If Lazarus doesn't deliver, this is going to be a major, setback on Jesus' credibility. But you notice his confidence. He doesn't go up to the opening of the tomb and whisper, hey, Lazarus, if you're in there, come on out. He doesn't do that. So if it doesn't happen, nobody hears. He didn't do that. He shouted. And it must have just startled and jolted this crowd. Lazarus, come forth. I mean, they had seen him heal the blind and cast out demons and calm the storm and heal lepers and so forth. But raise a person from the dead? Now, when I was a kid, there was a professional wrestler called the Mummy. It's the picture of it, okay? When my dad and we were going to Africa when I was 19, and we went to New York City flying there. And on Saturday night, we went to Madison Square Garden for a wrestling night. And we got in there, Andre the Giant was wrestling, and the Mummy was wrestling. Oh, man, this guy was spooky. He was all, as you can tell, he's all wrapped up. And this is what Lazarus would have looked like, basically, when he stepped. That's why I'm showing this. This is not just sudden break from wrestling, whatever, nostalgia. But when he walked out of the tomb, this is kind of what he would have looked like. He would have been wrapped up in these garments. Let me point out another aspect of this story that I think has a great lesson for us. In verse 23, when Martha had come out to meet Jesus, he told her plainly, your brother will rise again. But her response was, oh, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. She believed that God had the power to resurrect her brother in the future, just not now. This is so much like we are. We're confident that God can do anything in the past or in the future. But for the problems we're facing right now, We're not so sure about that, right? In verse 25, Jesus answers Martha's doubts with this great statement, I am the resurrection and the life. Not I was or I will be, but I am. Currently, right now, today, for your problems today, I am. And if Jesus Christ has the power to raise a man from the dead, you know he has enough power to come through on whatever you're going through, right? If he can do that, certainly he has that kind of power, and not just in the past, and not just in the future, but right now. However dismal, however hopeless your circumstances may be, he can raise somebody from the dead. He can come through for you. Mary and Martha didn't understand why Jesus had delayed in coming and letting their brother die. However, here is a very important truth I hope we'll never forget. A delay is not necessarily a denial. Just because God hasn't done it yet doesn't mean he's not going to do it. His timing and our timing, not always the same. Now, all of us who have had kids or currently have young kids have been coerced a time or two into taking them into Chuck E. Cheese, home of the world's worst pizza. And when we used to take our kids there, there's one particular game our kids loved. It's this thing where they have a mallet and these groundhogs stick their head up and they pop up and you try to whack them back down, right? But the moment you hit one, another one pops up. And then you hit that one down and they just keep popping up all over the time. And you can never get them all knocked down once and for all. And you know, life is a lot like that, isn't it? You whack down one problem, another one comes up. You deal with a relational conflict, then there's a health issue, then there's a financial issue, then there's a work issue, and then there's, blah, blah, blah. There's always something going on. Here's one of the more familiar verses in the Bible. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, you see that word strengthens that Paul uses here, to give me strength, whatever, is a Greek word, the word endunamo. It's the word in, the prefix in, which means to put something inside, and dunamo, from where we get our word dynamite. So it kind of means to infuse dynamite into something, or to infuse power into something, or in this case, someone. Paul is saying, I can do all things not on my own strength and power, but because Christ has infused his power, his dynamic power, into me. It is not my power and strength that enables me to face and overcome any and all problems, difficulties, and challenges. It is only God's strength infused in me. From time to time, problems, adversities, and heartbreaking troubles are going to come into our lives. Some are sudden, unexpected, traumatic. Others are prolonged, seemingly designed to wear us down over time. But God can heal and strengthen your troubled or broken heart. Sometimes what has seemed to be the worst possible thing that could have ever happened to me, God has turned into some of the best things that have ever happened to me. Now, not overnight, but over time. And while I was still in the middle of suffering and uncertainty and heartbreak, when there seemed to be no rescue on the way, no answers, no hope, God did eventually come through with his strengthening and healing power. He did eventually make all things work together for good. Well, I want to end my talk today by just asking if anybody here maybe came today, showed up here today with a broken heart over something that's happening in your life. Anybody here dealing with having your carefully planned life shattered by a unexpected twist of fate that you never thought could happen to you? Maybe some of us. Anybody here feeling so defeated and beat up by life that you're just not sure how much longer you can go on? Anybody here carrying a hurt or disappointment for so long that you're about to give up, that you'll ever actually get over it? Anyone here worried, scared about your future? Well, I have good news. There's not a magic wand that wave over and everything will go away. But know this, if you look to God, Psalm 46 says, God will be your refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. And so you don't have to fear. Easy to say, it's hard to do. You don't have to fear. Even if earthquakes come and the ground feels like it's coming out from underneath you, the mountains crumble into the sea. This is bad. The ocean's roaring and foaming. The mountains are trembling. The water is surging. That's not going to take you out. Not when God is your strength and your hope.